Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. We've been doing a lot of videos on litigation, all of these lawsuits, which is just because there is a lot of movement within a lot of these lawsuits. Today, I wanted to do the flip side of that coin, which is the legislature. And to do that, we've brought in the CRPA legislative director. He is the person who was fighting for your rights to have a CCW at the close of the last session to make sure that Senate Bill 918 did not pass. We got Rick Travis on. Rick, thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I just wanted to cut into this with you. I got a lot of questions because we have a special session that happened at the end of this year, which isn't something that I've seen happen too often. And we potentially have some bills to look forward to next year, some that we like, some that we don't like. And I kind of wanted to run through that with you. So as far as the legislature is concerned with this special session that happened, and as we now look into 2023, what was the special session called for? Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't called for anything on firearms-related laws. And why did firearms-related laws end up being in there in the first place?
The special session was called by Governor Newsom to deal with what he sees as the outrageous fuel prices in California, and that he nor the legislature had anything to do with that. That was all big oil. And so he wanted to penalize them because they were between, depending on whose study you looked at, 8 to 15 cents more per gallon than he felt they should be. So he called a special session to bring in legislation to deal with that, to try to work on negotiations. And so that's what it was supposed to be for. We got a little over 110 different bills between the two different houses, the Senate and the Assembly. Only about half a dozen were on the fuel issue, and the rest were pushed by legislators as spot bills for the most part, with an interesting twist, which we can talk about.
So, okay, so how does that actually happen? How do you call a special session for what? I mean, do these people just not really have any limitations to what they can or can't do? I mean, if I call a meeting and that meeting is supposed to be on something specific and I only take 12% of the time to talk about that, the other person who I'm in a meeting with is probably going to be pretty upset at me. Why do these legislators get the opportunity to talk about or create laws on other things when they call a special session for something very specific?
So the way this works, the special session can be called by the governor. In general, it's called, I mean, we have to remember legislative cycles go for 2 years. We always talk about this is the 23 session that we're going into, but we just finished up the 21-22 session, which was a 2-year cycle. So it coincides with their term of office. What happens in the case of a special session is the governor looks at usually the first, second week of December. That's when, after an election, legislators are actually in. So you don't normally see these in what we would call the odd years. You'll see them in an even year. They're not used all the time. Governor Brown did a couple times. But what happens is all the newly elected people are up there to be sworn in, so offices can be changed. Generally speaking, they try to assign during the special session who's going to be the speaker of different committees and chair those committees, things of that nature. Some of that happened. A lot of it didn't happen. It was kicked down the road till January when they come back into session on the 3rd. And so what you started to see was staffs started to try to push forward the calendar. Normally it's in January that we actually start to see the first, ideas of what a bill may or may not be. They try to rush in there to get the numbers, and then once they get the numbers assigned, then they start to flesh out the bill, and it goes to Ledge Council by the appointed date. And that's why usually we're gearing this up, and we'll be having this conversation, quite honestly, usually towards the end of January that we're going to have today.
Okay, so I guess small grievances aside on procedure, let's get to the bigger one. So what are some of the we had 918 last year. We've been preaching about how we're probably going to see it again in 2023. What are you seeing so far out of this special session on bills that we might be looking at in 2023?
Well, you bring 918 up, and that was half the package we defeated on the last night. Good friend of CRPA, Sam Paredes from Gunners of California, and I were up until the wee hours of the morning trying to fight those two bills. 1227, which was from Assembly Member Mark Levine. That is what has been affectionately called within the community the zombie bill, because before that was 1223. And then back in 2019, that was also, I believe, the second I could tell you really quick. Yeah, that was Assembly Bill 18 way back then. And that was the one that put the incredible excise gun tax on anybody buying firearms or ammunition. It would literally price a lot of people out of the marketplace if it was put forward, and was put forward for what was called gun violence prevention. And, one of the things that we have said on this is that'd be the equivalent of saying, hey, Kevin, I'm going to raise your taxes on your driver's license and everything else, because that's going to prevent somebody else from driving drunk or carjacking or any of the number of things that happen natively with the vehicle. And we all know that would have zero impact on prevention. So it's just another tax to punish lawful gun owners. We thought when we defeated it, because they tried to run it on an urgency clause. And I wanted to explain, because a lot of people don't understand what the urgency clause is. The urgency clause comes out of our own California Constitution, and it has two important points in it. One of those points is that it can be used for public safety. That something is so horrifically happening right now in this space, it can't wait to come into law till January or July, when generally laws, become actually enforceable. So an urgency clause means that the moment the bill is passed and the governor signs it, as soon as the pen stroke's done, it's law. It's like in play right then and there. But it has a higher bridge that it has to pass. It has to pass in both houses by better than 2/3 of a vote. And so legislators, regardless of what party they're reluctant a lot of times to vote for something like that, because the argument could be made, what necessitated this becoming an urgent claused bill? And so on the tax, that was one of the ways we were able to defeat it. Levine termed out. He's done being in the legislature, and we thought the bill that we had called the zombie bill was dead. Assemblyman Gabriel decided, no, it's not going to be dead. And so has already brought that back. So we're not really looking forward to it. And it will now be known, that is now Assembly Bill 28. And so he's coming back with it. And again, it's the exact same arguments we've seen 3 times previously and defeated. And part of his mantra is, this is in direct thing. We're going to shut down everything that the Bruen decision tried to do. We're going to tie, the community, us, up in courtrooms. And so they're just going for it. And that same madness can be seen from Senator Portantino, who took a dealer record of sale adjustment bill, which was originally what Senate Bill 918 was, and turned it into the antithesis of everything that Justices Thomas, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Alito, and Chief Justice Roberts had done in the Bruen decision. Like all the thou shalt nots, Portantino flipped over to say, we're going to do. And so that's what Senate Bill 2 is, its new number, is about. And what was interesting, as I said earlier, spot bills, where you just kind of put, here's the bill, here's the author, and any co-authors, and this is a title. That's it. Well, what they did was they threw out, and here's all of our evidence that we're going to cite, but there's no bill language yet. But it's very telling by the evidence. And the quote that I will use from Portantino, he said, it's to enact legislation to address the United States Supreme Court decision in the New York Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen. So he's literally wants to defy the opinion of the court. That's literally what this is.
So I'm glad that you brought up Bruen, and something that Chuck has been talking about is how Heller was really the end of the beginning. Bruen was the end of the middle, and now we're pushing towards the end. I think that obviously is affecting the legislature. I mean, once Bruen came out, we started seeing proposed legislation directly in defiance of it. I think Senate Bill 918 was a clear indication of that. Basically, what I'm hearing from you now is that that's not going to slow down, and I don't think it would be fair, for the anti-2A people to think that we're going to stop fighting, just like I don't think it's fair for us to think that they're going to stop fighting. So this isn't necessarily something I can say that we didn't see coming, but what always remains to be seen is how bad is it actually going to be. We fight a lot of anti-Second Amendment legislation every single year up in Sacramento. Are you anticipating them ramping it up from last year, or it being the same, or it being less than last year?
No, they're already ramping it up. They are a little bit more sensitive in the sense that they're calling their opposition, which would be people like myself, Sam Paredes, and others, and trying to see how much we're going to fight them on some things. But we're looking at probably at least 2, maybe 3 different bills on firearm storage. One of the conversations I have that I can share without naming people was, hey, we would like to see if we could get people to carry storage lockers into the field when they hunt. And I'm like, really? So the backpack, the fact that I have to remove the animal that I just hunted, and now you want me to carry a 20-pound thing when I'm out in the middle of nowhere to lock my firearm up in? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, because what has happened that would require such a law after well over a century and a half of hunting in California with modern rifles? And there was silence. And I'm like, so no, we're not going to do that. There's other ones that are coming out on trying to standardize training, put more things under the government's control by you having to go to the state to get certain certifications for firearms. It's everything they can do to remove control from the local law enforcement agencies, from local businesses, and put it in the hands of the government. And if you look at the potholes in LA, you look at all the things they promised us they were going to fix with the taxes they've already taxed us on and have failed to do so, why would you ever want to give them anything else?
Well, and not only that, I'm sure that it's pretty understood that a lot of the law enforcement departments throughout the state as a whole are very supportive of the Second Amendment community, specifically the sheriffs. I understand that we have great relationships with a lot of sheriffs and a lot of sheriff's departments around here. So that's not necessarily surprising to me that that's something that they would be attacking. I guess the onslaught continues, and that's fine because, fortunately we do have people like you who are up there lobbying. So generally speaking, what would you say are the proactive measures that we're going to be taking to fight this stuff? Is it just simply the fact we've made all these arguments before? I mean, we made the arguments on Senate Bill 918 last year. We've argued the excise tax. I can't tell you how many times. What ends up being new here? Is it all new, or is it all the same arguments?
A lot of it's the same arguments. Some of the arguments that I know Chuck has been talking about with the history, text, and tradition that was cited in Bruen, they're trying to make some fairly erroneous historical argumentation. We're able to defeat that. We've got a great team of researchers, not just here in California, but nationwide. They've been working on that post-Bruen. I think there's some other things that people are going to see out of the CRPA. We're going on offense. We're not fighting defensively. So we've already been engaged, just like they started things up in the special session. We started pushing back during the special session. We're working on a couple of very positive, forward-thinking bills that, I look forward to coming back on the show and announcing in mid-January, once we have our numbers assigned to those, that we're going to be pushing. But moreover, thankfully to our volunteers and our chapter program that you oversee, Kevin, those are providing us with some additional resources in this fight to put some pressure on local offices of these different members, both in the Assembly and Senate. And we have a great set of volunteers. They're led by a couple of our chapter leaders in the North that work with me in Sacramento to make sure we can keep pressure on those phone lines within the Capitol building. So this is a very robust issue. And also, hat tip to the California State Sheriff's Association, because there are some pieces of legislation that we are jointly supporting each other on and pushing back against the legislature for going a bridge too far.
Well, that's definitely something to look forward to. And if you don't know where these lawsuits come from that CRPA continues to file, they come from terrible laws, and those terrible laws are created in the legislature. That's why we're going to, that's why we're going to keep paying attention to this. Rick, I want to thank you for coming on. I look forward to you coming on again in January when the session opens to continue and educate us as much as you can about what these anti-Second Amendment pieces of legislation are coming down. Thank you very much for being here.